Check your time. Hey, you're live.
Okay.
So whenever. You don't have to stop, I'm worry.
Well, good evening and welcome to the Career Ministry tonight. Tonight we have Ed Dwyer, who's going to be speaking to us about career versus calling, which should be a very fascinating topic. Ed is from Cincinnati originally. He's owned a home in Ponte Vedra for 4 years, and he's a career banker who tried to leave banking to go to work for North Avenue Capital, and ended up having that organization bought by a bank. So he's a banker. He is a banker. So we welcome him tonight. We'd like to get started first with a prayer. So if you would just join me. So in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Lord Jesus Christ, you wanted all who are weary to come to you for support. Lord, I am worn out by my inability to find wage-earning work. With the changing job market, guide me in this pursuit to opportunities with the future, so there is not an immediate recurrence of this ordeal. Day after day, my worries and fear grow as the rejections of my applications mount. I am able and willing to work, but I cannot find a worthwhile job. Please help me to obtain one soon. Until I find employment, ease my worries regarding my financial situation and help me to take advantage of the time available to get closer to you. Let me realize that there are other ways to bring about your kingdom on earth besides salaried work. Help me to make use of them for the time being so that I may continue to grow as a person for your greater glory. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Thank you, Lord. So one of the traditions that we have in the career ministry is that the first night that you come, you have to do a quick introduction of yourself, just an elevator speech. So who would like to go first? Who hasn't been before?
And just traveled in Latin America. I can speak a couple languages and just looking to continue on with my career in finance. So I'm coming to check out this ministry because Joan said so many good things. So.
Okay, anybody? Yes.
I'm not new, but I haven't been here in a while, but I just wanted to wish some good Irish luck to everybody. End of last year to leave the corporate world, not go back into it, and become a self-employed realtor. So I am starting out, this is my second month. So if any of you know anybody or have any need for real estate, either buying, selling, but I do have some green Hershey Kisses on the back for everybody. So before you leave, please help yourself and enjoy the sweets. And may the luck of the Irish be with all of you. Okay?
Thank you, and congratulations on your new
I
endeavor.
saw your ad in the English.
Yeah. So
Nice marketing tie-in.
yeah. Well, that was something my mother-in-law, who's been a realtor in New York for 40 years, she started her business off by putting an ad in the church bulletin. And it was also to give 10% of the proceeds from your net commissions to a church, whatever the campaign was going on at the time. So I did the same. So it just ran for the first
Oh,
week.
that's great.
That's yeah, so it's a lot putting your own business together, but I'm working on it. So
That's great. That's
Catherine kind of did a curve through with us early when she came in and had some conversations, but I'm kind of glad for her that she found what she wanted. And I had it in mind all along. Thank you. All done.
yes.
John don't do anything for kisses, so don't.
So I'm notorious for doing some curveballs. And since
Yes.
it's my, yes, I am.
Knuckles.
So since it's my dear friend Ed and he's used to this, and since you really wanted to be in the midst of a crowd, instead of staring at a blank wall, why don't you sit in the middle and I'll just move the computer around so everybody can at least get some idea of the audience.
All right. Okay. And you want me over there then?
Yeah.
So,
So while Ted is doing that session that we're going to have, Jacqueline Coyne Cox will be joining us, and she is the Associate Dean of Recruitment at Florida Community College of Jacksonville. And the community colleges, at least in this state, they've been given a mandate to support workforce improvement and workforce growth and development. So there are a lot of things that are available through community colleges at either low or no cost. There are tools, and there are also lots of classes. They're not necessarily four-year degrees. But if your skills are rusty, that's one place to go, to the community college. If you want some career information that's kind of unique, Jackie has access to that kind of information. And she'll be here at our meeting 2 weeks from tonight in this location.
All right. So you can see and hear me from here, Ted, you're saying? That'll work?
I'm gonna double check.
All right.
Camera's here.
We're just gonna see.
You might come down with it. Ted, you want up here or?
Is it be all the way up there?
what do you like to type here?
Looking at the spotlight
Yeah,
there.
that's- Oh, no.
Wait, move my seat.
That's what I was thinking, right in
All
there.
right. Well, here. I'm not looking at everything.
We'll have a new designer of.
Here.
Let's just go back the way you're doing.
Oh, we're here. Yep, you're good right where you are. Or a little bit, you can get a little bit further back. We're recording.
Is this for?
There we go. Off the screen.
But I'm looking this way.
You can turn around, you can do the 360. It's surround sound, eh? Or would,
All right. We'll make it work. Well, hey, good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. I'm a born and raised Catholic, Irish, at Dwyer, right? The Dwyer family, that's Prairie County, don't you know? Chicago, born, and then moved to Cincinnati. Yes, went to school in Michigan and back to Cincinnati. But went to Moeller High School in Cincinnati, all boys Catholic school. People may know it from Ken Griffey Jr. went there, and Jerry Faust, and a lot of others. And my son, by the way, who's actually in my house right now in St. Augustine, goes to Boston College. He went to a Jesuit high school and then went on to Jesuit experience at BC. And so for me, just always been really part of the flavor and fabric of the Catholic community. So when Ted and I were talking about this, I said, why don't you come on and help us out with this? So part of my talk tonight is really just telling my story. So that's the easy part, right? Because I think it does fit very much into what I think a lot of you are trying to help with your entire parish, or people who are struggling with as life changes. And just so you know, I've got some notes here that go back to March 20th, 2020, which is what? Like literally right when COVID took off. And I was at the St. Anastasia Catholic Church, which is right down the street from where I live in St. Augustine. I mean, what was the bulletin that day? Right? Be salt of the earth and light of the world wherever you are. And it just so happened to be, I'm going to kind of do my story like it loops, but I started right out of college as a banker. Finance and accounting degree, started with a bank, 5 years credit analyst, became a commercial banker, got recruited by a bank in Cincinnati, which they saw that's where I come from, went to high school, and ended up spending 27 years at that bank. And at 53 years old, I decided to walk away. Everybody said, you're crazy, what are you doing? It's, bankers, they just stay forever. He doesn't like it.
sorry.
And so this was between 2017 and today has been a really wild ride. In a lot of ways, in really troubling ways. Like it was a lot of fear. You talked about that, right? In terms of why is this not coming together? And so this message that day was just so unbelievable. Be the salt of the earth and light wherever you are, wherever God has placed you in that moment in time. And so I found myself, kind of, not putting so much pressure on myself about what's next, right? I committed to myself, I'm not going to do what would be the easy thing to do, is just go to work for another bank, which it always kills me to see that. Every time I see a banker that get squeezed out because of an acquisition or whatever, they run around and I got to find the next place to go like tomorrow. And they don't give themselves a break for some reason, or even to step back and say, isn't there something else I could maybe do in life? And so so I came to a group, it was financial awareness seminar. So it was really all about investments and so forth. But I kind of came with a curveball where all these people are talking about bonds and, portfolios, and everybody's falling asleep. And I said, I think what we're here to talk about is not the fear of necessarily running out of money. It's the fear of not living the life that you wanted to live and regret it. That's the biggest fear we all have, right? And so when you get to that point too, where I did work for 27 years in banking, so thus being a banker, I put away money in my 401k, and I had, the stock portfolio. So there was the safety net, right? Where I was able to kind of walk away and risk it for a while. Not everybody has that luxury. But even then, it was very unsettling, the sense of like, hey, I'm just 53, 54. It was too early for me to like start to pull everything out. So we put this unnecessary pressure on ourselves, I think. And I tell you, the more and more with just the faith and a sense of, it's in God's time. It's not in my time. Everybody, we're so anxious to what's the next thing. And the worst thing I see people do all the time is they grab the next thing and they take it because they're desperate. Like, oh, I need it so bad. And then they look up one day and say, why did I do this? Right? They're stuck then, and they they can either ride it out but be miserable, or do the right move and move on and say, no, that's not it. And so I had a wonderful. I want to say something about my time at U.S. Bank, which wasn't U.S. Bank when I joined. It was a smaller regional bank called Star Bank in the 90s, which had a decent small regional footprint, but there wasn't really a CEO that could take it to the next level. So they brought this outsider in from California, and he brought a younger guy with them. And those two ended up being the CEOs of the bank for the next 20 some years together, and turned it into the 5th largest bank in the country. It was a wild ride. And these two were amazing leaders. And one of the best things I ever did in my career, and these are two intertwined, is these two gentlemen that came in and said, we're a big fan of banking schools, sending our top bankers to a banking school, which Ted and I teach at now, right? Through the Consumer Bankers Association. But in 1995, I got asked to go to a banking school. I thought I was going to Stonier, actually, but there were 3 of us, and our head of our group said, you can't all 3 go to banking school at the same time. Someone's going to have to go somewhere else. So I'd never been to Seattle. There was this Pacific Coast banking school. So I said, what the heck, I'll go to Seattle. That decision turned into just a massive part of my life. After graduating, they invited me to come back as an instructor in this leadership program. For 20 years, I taught leadership and ran the leadership program for this banking school, where the average age students, similar to CBA, is 40. They're already leaders, and you're trying to get them to be the next level up. And if there's one thing I learned in that, is when you teach, you learn. And whatever it is, you find an opportunity to teach. And from that, what was I teaching? I was teaching leadership. So I became a better leader over time. Like, I find myself saying things to these students, encouraging them, thinking to myself, I don't do that anymore. Stop doing that. Why have I stopped doing that? And I'd go back, all my team would always say, Joe Ed's been to banking school, right? He's coming back, he's doing all this stuff. But man, it helped me. And so here's the deal. I had 4 careers at U.S. Bank over 27 years, 4 completely different jobs, right? I grew up in the commercial side. Like most people do, they got a line of sight straight up the ladder. That's where they want to go. They don't look at other ladders. They look straight up. They're like, I want to be the head of the commercial team. Well, out of the clear blue, right before Christmas, they get invited up to the CEO's office, and he says, we want you to become the regional president for a community bank, north of town. And I literally said, what are you talking about? That sounds like the worst possible job ever. And he says, no. He says, you're going to learn how to run branches. I've never worked in a branch in my life. They want to run a branch network, a private client group, be the face of the community, work with the press. And he said, you're going to thank me for this, because you're going to learn how to run a whole bank inside of a bank. I promise you. And not only that, you're going to kill it. You're going to do it. And he was right. And so it taught me a couple things is, don't chart your path so definitively, because then you'll miss the opportunities that are right in front of you. That you say, no, I don't want to do that. No, I don't want to do it. Well, why not take a look at it? And then it happened again when we were buying some failed banks in West in California during the financial crisis, and they asked me to go to the on-site CEO. I said, I have no idea how to do that. I said, we don't really care. You know a lot how the bank runs now. And then the last one, the worst one, they're going to ask me to be the chief risk officer for the entire consumer and small business bank within U.S. Bank. 4 years I did that. But in each case, when I said, I don't understand, that I don't have any technical knowledge for that. And the answer literally was the same in different words. We don't really care. You've proven that you can lead in this organization. You'll figure out the job. But what we know will happen is that team will be led well. And they'll do well. And then you will learn more about different parts of the bank. So that was a life lesson to me. And it was also something I think that organizations don't do very well is pick people up and drop them into a different part of the bank where they have kids' eyes, right? They show up at a different part of any organization, not just banks, any organization. And I don't know that happens a lot. I'm not sure really why not. Right. And believe me, it's stressful as heck because you're kind of like the emperor with no clothes for a little while. You're running around, you're the boss. And finally, I had to ask people, what exactly are we talking about right now? Because there's such different language behind the curtain that Ted knows what I'm talking about. And so all that to be said that when I finished like that fourth career, I knew I was done. There was like nothing else I could think to do. And so when my boss came to me and said, all right, well, I'm thinking about this for you to do next. And I said, I'm leaving. What do you mean you're leaving? I'm done. And I always said that I was never going to be that person that just works all the way until retirement at the same place. And I knew so many people at US Bank that are still there. And like, why are they still doing that? And I think they're afraid. It's back to the fear thing. They're financially cozy, but they are so afraid of what's on the other side. And it hinders their ability, I think, to really take that next chance to do something bold. And so in 2018, then, I went to work for the CBA for a guy named Richard Hunt, who is now retiring from the CBA, but I'd gotten to know him through being a chair of a risk committee at the CBA, a banking trade in DC. And so he asked me to come work for him for 90 days to do a deep dive into all aspects of their organization, which included the banking school. He liked the fact that I had been at a different banking school, and he wanted me to, and I don't quite know if I told you the truth of what I was doing.
It's fine.
I was kind of a mole, right? And of course, Paul Leventhal, who lives nearby, who runs this amazing simulation, he and I just went for lunch in January of 2020 and said, we have a spot open in our third year faculty. Would you happen to want to come aboard? And I said, I'd love to come aboard because I left the banking school in Seattle because I had to. Richard had me signed a non-compete, and he said, you can't teach there anymore. So it was through that strange thing that came up, and I'd love to teach. Can't tell. And so, but then I worked in DC after that with a consulting firm, and that was one of those cases where I took a job. Like this guy kept selling me, you could do this, and I go, yeah, but it's risk and compliance. I hate risk and compliance. Yeah, but we need a banker. We need somebody to come in here. Literally 2 months in, I said, I made a mistake. I hate this. And so toward right at the end of that year, I said, this just is not working out. I'm sorry, but it's not good for either of us to need to continue on. And so I cut it off, and I said, what? But because I went there, though, a lady who I met who was chairing another committee at the CBA also ended up in the same consulting firm. And she comes up to me one day, she goes, we need to start a business together. I was like, really? Doing what? Black female. She was one of the highest ranking black females in history of the FBI, then went to B of A for 12 years. And she was tired of that and ended up in this consulting firm. She goes, I think the reason why we're both here and hated here is for us to meet each other. And we did. We started a business in January of 19. And it was me doing my leadership development and her having been a leader at the FBI, at Bank of America, and so many other things, and helping organizations increase their diversity and inclusion. And our whole theory was, let's create really diverse teams and have them be better leaders together. And thus they'll earn their way up an organization. And boy, I tell you, we were having a blast. And it was really like lightning in a bottle. This is it. Everybody was inviting us to come speak. People were warm up. At the end of night 2019, coming on our 1-year anniversary, we were planned out all over the country in 2020. COVID killed it. Every single event we were going to got canceled. And we started doing video presentations and so forth. And she's like, ah, this is not what I thought we were going to do. This is not working. So we shut it down. She just said, I just can't do this. So I kind of saw that coming. So I pivoted my attention. Instead of calling on banks around the country, I started focusing on Northeast Florida, where we bought a house down here in 2011 in St. Augustine. And I have to tell you guys, it was President's Day weekend, 2011. That's Daytona 500 weekend, right? We just had. Then a buddy of ours was involved with, because he works for Bass Pro Shops, and he's would come down. He says, "You want to come down?" So we stay in this really cool place, St. Augustine. We've never been. My wife and I, our two sons, just absolutely thought it was the most amazing place. And I literally had something just tug at me spiritually, like, wow, there's something, I'm supposed to be here for some reason, literally. And 2 months later, we closed on our house. As a banker, that's a really impulsive thing to do. And I have literally been walking around down there. You know, you go to that Nombre facility right where they had the first Catholic Mass.
Right.
And you just have this feeling like something happened here. And I literally would say out loud to myself, why am I here? I'm here for some reason. And I kept that sense of faith that there's something there. So when I pivoted toward building relationships in Northeast Florida, St. Augustine, St. Johns County, joined the Chamber of Commerce, setting up the Small Business Council, all of a sudden things just started happening, one right after another, in the midst of COVID. I was presenting on strategic planning at a Small Business Council, and up walked 2 ladies and a guy, and they said, "Here are our cars, you need to come see us." It's the St. Francis House, the homeless shelter in St. Augustine. Just today, I hosted a putt-putt tournament for that homeless shelter. I'll be the chair of the board starting in May. And it has been phenomenal. What has happened there, the people, the things that I was able to do, they weren't going to get PPP because they didn't really know how. And the executive director's husband had died. I said, well, we can't not do this. And so I got a hold of Cecil Gibson, the president from Marist Bank, and I said, Cecil, he'd already gotten to know me as a banker at the time. So we've got to get this money in. And at the last hour, we got it in, and they got $220,000. They got it all refunded or forgiven. And then it just started happening again. And you hear my message here, right? Like when I got on a path that I didn't expect is when I kept my eyes up in that faith that in God's time, not my time. And when you start just relaxing, I think you're that much more open to finding new relationships, and just all of a sudden things just started happening. I went to an event where a chamber event where someone came up and said, "Oh, I'm with Make-A-Wish." Well, that CEO that was so amazing at US Bank, his name was Richard Davis. He retired. He is now the CEO of Make-A-Wish America. So through all that, I ended up joining their advisory board here in Northeast Florida. And I did leadership programs for the CEO and her leadership team for the next year during COVID. I did it just for free. And Richard Davis caught wind of it. And he goes, "Oh man, yeah. I've seen he would come to speak at the bank school every year." So that was a weird twist. And I could literally go on and on. So then I was putting together some programming for the chamber. And I said, I got to talk to somebody at the Small Business Development Center, because I knew from back home, they're great. They're always through UNF here and across the country. They have these Small Business Development Centers. So I said, who's the right person there? Marge Cirillo. So I get all this Marge. "Hey, Marge, my name's Ed, banker. I put together this program, resources for small business." And she says, "Well, so what are you doing now?" And I says, "I'm not doing anything." Because my business is toast. I'm just helping out with some nonprofits in town, helping out with the chamber. She goes, "Why don't you come work for us? You can get a job at UNF, SVDC, and help us out with this PPP and everything else." And it was just kind of an OPS position. And I said, sure, why not? So I go through this whole onboarding process at UNF, kind of the whole time saying, why am I doing this, right? But just what do you got to lose, right? And so here I just help all these different businesses, with what to do, how to deal with the stress of what's going on with COVID. And through that, I met these people in North Avenue Capital, which is where I work now. They were a client because they were like a 5 or 6 year old firm founded here in Ponte Vedra. And I did a panel discussion on financing options here at Sawgrass, TP Sawgrass one time. And sitting on the panel was the CEO or COO at the time of this North Avenue Capital. He says, hey, can we go have some lunches so I can pick your brain a little bit because we're really struggling in certain areas. And I'm like, oh, piece of cake. All you got to do is boom, 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 boom. Finally, like in the third lunch, he just slides over and offer. He goes, will you please just come work for us? I wasn't looking for a job. And he said, because we're probably going to get bought by a bank. And I said, no, I don't want to work for them. No, but you can help us. It's been wonderful. And guess what? Their values and mission statement is we are to serve God through financial impact that they get. They're a national lender using the USDA Department of Agriculture Guarantee Loan Program. And they were a non-bank lender, and they became the #1 lender in the country in 2020. And he said, I'm going to need your help. So he ended up becoming the CEO of the firm, and I'm heading up a bunch of different stuff. And these are just wonderful people, and they recruited all these kids. They're literally kids. Half the staff are in their 20s. And they're like sponges, man. They're like, I'm doing these lunch and learns on how to read a bank financial statement. What does it mean to work for a bank and all this? And I feel like what all this boils down to in the title of what this talk's supposed to be is career versus calling. I mean, there are some people that I think really do have the blessing to have their career be their calling, right? Like great doctors or whatever. They're really doing their God's mission, and they're able to be compensated for it. But there's this sense of that your career is you're doing in order to save for retirement, provide for your children's education, and there's a dropping point where that falls off, and then you then go to what is your calling? What is God's calling? But then there's a line, there's a great book that Cassie Chandler, by the way, was my partner, and she said there's this book called The Hole in Our Gospel, Richard Stearns. And I read like crazy during COVID. He goes, nothing else, right? But he talked about career, and part of my career is upward mobility, and that your calling often becomes downward mobility, like recognizing it's not about making money. And so, but when you say that, you end up kind of doing okay because that's not your #1 motivation. And for me, that I really went around thinking that's what this is all about. My career was at the bank, and I always knew there was something else, but it had to be my calling. And then it went on further. In one message to you guys, never, networking I think is so overplayed, really, networking. But however you want to call it, it's building relationships. And by complete chance, I was sitting downtown St. Augustine one evening with my wife, who was with some people that do tour guides. And I thought this lady was with them. She goes, no, I'm just sitting here. And I said, oh, what do you do? And she had moved up from Miami, and she was in private equity. And she says, I'm going to buy this building right here and put it in a restaurant or whatever. And I said, yeah, right. Well, she did. So I realized, okay, this lady's got game. So I said, let's have lunch sometime. And I started listening to her, and I said, you need to meet somebody. So there's a performing arts center concept brewing in St. Augustine called the Epicenter Alliance. I don't want to get into this too much. And I said, she goes, I need to meet those people. And ever since then, this project has gone from limping along to maybe going to be happening one day. And I was a parks commissioner back home in Ohio for 12 years, and we built this amazing complex. So I understand public-private partnerships. And so she and I, and this is just a little side thing, I get compensated for it, but it's one of those things where if we pull this off, this would be a legacy project that will be around forever. And so watch out for the Epicenter Alliance. We got shot down by the city commission a couple weeks ago in St. Augustine, wanting to put it on some land the city owns. They didn't want to do it. But then she in turn says, one of my partners in Miami is this large electrical contracting business. You really need some help from somebody. So I picked up the phone and started talking to him. He says, can I hire you? And I said, no, but we could just sign a statement of work. Okay. So I'm helping him out. And so, and I literally at this point, I wasn't even trying to find, it's just meeting interesting people and seeing where it would go. And so I think for me, a lot of the talk is really around this notion of having faith, but daring to not go down, the predictable path. The line I just so love is growth requires a temporary suspension of comfort, right? Like they say, you can't grow if you're comfortable. And so growth comes from putting yourself in, challenging situations. So you got to kind of tamp that down, but really dare to just, try something completely different. I think about this line where Mother Teresa says that she saw that herself as that I am a little pencil in the hand of a writing God who is sending a love letter to the world. That she heard things to be able to write it. And so when you think about, you're really creating your own story, that you want to look back on and say, that was a really wild ride, as opposed to, did I just play it safe? And so, from a timing standpoint, I'm sort of too far along. I know, we half hour out. Keep going. So, I always kind of hesitate on this one, but what the heck, we're all in the place of God in the Catholic Church, but there are also tragedies along the way in your lives, which I guarantee you in this room, you would all have one in many that already, have occurred. And those can be really pivotal. They can either push you to the light or push you to the dark. And so, part of that whole thing about something about being in St. Augustine, so good. So I just kind of give this talk too. I did this in North Avenue recently where we were introducing ourselves, and I talked about how, for me growing up, I was youngest of 5, growing up in a Catholic family. I mean, there was no drama. It was really great family. Being the youngest is the best thing in the world, right? Because everybody else, the parents are tired of parenting anymore, and it's like, where's it? I don't know. Happy-go-lucky life, going through high school, soccer team captain, go on a soccer scholarship to college, graduating 4 years, get a job right out of college, get my MBA at night, get this promotion, go to Cincinnati. Kind of like, life's just cruise along, marry this wonderful lady, Christine. We have a boy. 4 years later, we have a boy. Next year, we have a girl. Everything's coming along until that wild, nice little, happy-go-lucky life, heart condition for our daughter.
Oh.
Knew it in vitro, but still, we were told, Cincinnati Children's, we've seen this condition. We know big baby, 10 pounds, 2 ounces. So, we think we can fix her. And obviously the story goes, they didn't. After 6 months, she passed. And, it's just brutal, right? When you're a dad with 2 sons and you lose a daughter, all through school, it's father-daughter dance time. Let's get married. And tough times, right? And the beautiful thing was at the bank, the CEO called me up and he said, when we were in the hospital going through all the stuff in the PIC units and so forth, that I was there most of the time, he says, you do not work for U.S. Bank anymore. You work for your family. Don't care how long it takes. Your team's got you. I got your back. And so, for a while, took that time, and somehow, it's almost like a period of time in my life I forget, like it's real black, but somehow I worked through that time, but shortly after that, it became abundantly clear to me during his tests is that Tess was absolutely still around. Did you ever heard of Matthew Kelly?
Yep.
Matthew Kelly, he does a lot of Catholic work, and he does this amazing Lent thing right now. It comes out. So I was helping out a regional president who had gone through some kind of a mental breakdown of some sort, and I needed to move him out of the organization, but I wanted to do it in a really, respectful way and not have him be embarrassed. And so we were able to come. He handed me this book, The Rhythm of Life by Matthew Kelly. He says, you need this probably more than I do. And I read that book, and I realize he makes a reference that he is in Cincinnati, but he's Australian.
Mm-hmm.
So I picked the phone one day, and I just called the office, and they said, so what does he do? And I said, well, he's kind of goes to Catholic churches and in Catholic events and speaks and writes, but he also has kind of a business that he does for organizations. So I said, would he be willing to come speak at a bank event? I was running these markets through Ohio and Indiana, and sure. So he invites me in just to have a chat. So what are you thinking you want to talk about? And I said, well, Reese, he always talks about that as bankers, you have the ability to help people achieve their dreams. Talking about this dream concept that people can really think about the noble role or whatever. And he starts getting this big grin on his face. I'm like, what? He goes, I'm writing a book called The Dream Manager right now. My God. Oh, no, what I forgot to tell you is when I asked, so when is he going to be speaking next in the Cincinnati area? And she says, oh, he's going to be at St. Susanna Parish on October 30th. And that was my home parish. So this is where things started saying, Tess, what is happening here? And so this guy, he says, yeah, so I ended up reading the transcript of his Dream Manager thing and kind of gave some thoughts or whatever. So he publishes that book. I'm a character in that book. There's Ed, a banker from whatever. He threw me in there. He goes, oh, Ed. He ended up going to Seattle with me under the banking school of teaching or whatever. And just our worlds collided. And so that was the first inkling that she was absolutely around. And so November 13th is her birthday, November 13th of 2018. So that was at the point when I decided DC was not at all where I wanted to go, and was really kind of thrown for a loop and walking down the beach in Crescent Beach. Just middle of the day, surf's up, and I'm just praying, and I'm praying to her, and I'm praying to God, and just saying, all right, I'm lost right now. What am I supposed to be doing? And I look down, and it's like, and I always collect shells because our whole front walkway is shells, and always adding to it. And I'm like, that's a strange shell. And it was kind of shiny, and I turned it over. So this would have been her 18th birthday. And it had a word on it. And it says, dare. I mean, isn't that just crazy? And then, of course, dare to what? And one of the other books that I read that during my time, is Neil Gorsuch's book, A Republic If You Can Keep It. Talks about the biggest thing is take a risk. Don't take the safe road. Dare to chart your own course. Or to dare is to do. If you're a soccer person, Tottenham, football club, to dare is to do. So on her birthday, right, sends me this message. And it was from that point when things just really took off. And I continued to just feel that there's, that whole draw to St. Augustine and this, the projects that we're working with and what's going on with just the whole mission of life and how that all, I think I've taken that place from the career to the calling. And it continues to just lead to just really amazing places. And so I hope that message kind of resonates for anybody within the parish and so forth that's struggling with, what am I supposed to do in God's time? And relax your prayer even just before kind of references that. Allow me to reduce the stress because, that's when you start missing things in life, recognizing the relationships that could really be the life-changing ones you're looking for, but you're so caught up in what didn't go right. And just allow yourself to take a break, and sometimes even that, just go take a break for a while and come back refreshed. So I'd love to just kind of have a conversation about some things or something that resonates with all of you. Yes.
You sound so full. Because you sound like you fulfilled things in yourself and you sound so full of life right now.
Full of life right now? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much. You're right. It's and every day's great fun. I mean, there's some challenging stuff I'm dealing with work just outside. We've got a company that went into bankruptcy but no, but the owner just keeps calling me and he just says, I can tell you've really got my best interest in mind and I'm helping people every day. And I really didn't realize is like, there is something as a banker that you really do have that blessing of helping people. And thus, when I was doing this stuff with the SBDC, it kind of brought me back around. So I realized, I used to say that this at the bank, every promotion I got took me further and further away from what I love to do, where it got to be a chore. And I find myself coming full circle back to what I was really good at, what I really love to do, which was helping other people through the ability to help them with the finance and whatever else. So you're right.
That's what I meant.
It's very fulfilling. Thank you. So others, maybe somebody's thinking where you're at in your place. Yes.
So I have a couple questions. One, I was intrigued by banking school. I wondered what that was. I hope that's not too specific a question. And then
No.
two, I'm actually applying to some MBA programs right now. And so I was wondering, I don't know about when you went to school, but a lot of these programs now will offer like a concentration both in finance and entrepreneurship. And I'm Catholic and I've always known for like a decade, I feel called to make money for the church in some way. And so perhaps through like an entrepreneurial fashion. Anyway, I'm not trying to babble about myself. I'm just trying to ask you, one, what is banking school? And two, what do you think of this like entrepreneurial slant that a lot of these MBA programs have now? Do you need it? Is it bogus? Is it good to have with the finance? Is that too specific or?
No, go back to the banking school. There's all levels of it, right? There's banking schools at the state level, like the Florida Bankers Association in Tallahassee has schooling for younger bankers to learn about different things. And then the program that Ted and I are involved with, if when you become in a leadership position, average age 40, it's to take them to the next level. So there's all kinds of layers of banking school. But the concept of entrepreneurialism, I think, really took off at universities in the last couple decades. Like my son is a BC. He has, a finance major. He's going into investment banking. But they have an entrepreneurial program there. So there's some curriculum around it and an actual program to try to encourage students to learn how to be entrepreneurs. So, and COVID has proven that, the explosion of new businesses that have happened, it's historical. So a lot of people decided, they kind of come to the same conclusion I did, is life's too short, to keep doing a commute if they were driving a half an hour every day, which is something to do each way. They're like, this is ridiculous. Why am I living this kind of life? So they decided to start a business or whatever the case might be, or to go into being a realtor,
Your own business.
which it is.
If I could add on, not about banking school, because Ed and I could talk all day about that. But the point about taking a chance or daring, at our parish, we're embarking on a capital campaign to build a new church. And without going into a lot of details, I think there's examples in our overall community of people of parishes that followed a conventional path and came up with a conventional result. And I think what inspires all the parishioners at St. John Paul II is our pastor, Father Rich Pagano, who really has a vision and an enthusiasm and sees beyond the obvious. But I think it starts with daring. And daring, trying something different when the world or even his colleagues might say, well, you're going in a different path than everybody else is doing. And so I think my point is it takes prayer and faith, as Deb was saying, in God's plan to say, I will go forward on that path and trust in his perfect plan.
Right.
I also would add to that, you need disciples for that vision. That's where some of us are, and that's where you are. I relate to everything you have said. I was one of you way back when, a few years older. But I think this is the message for today's world. no matter what you're doing, Yvonne, for you, there's so many things you can do, and who's gonna say no if you wanna do it? And that's what I think is important, is to take a chance on yourself. What have you got to lose, other than the experience? And in God's time, I think that's a very moving. But I really think there's people who need to hear the message because it's for real. This is not a, got lucky.
Right.
And it does come out of a plan that someone who's not where we are, but he knows where we are. And so I'm really grateful for your coming, because I wake up every morning and say, never lose courage. I write it down in my magnificent. And above that is Jesus. And so I look at these messages, I look at the results, and you can inspire by your example, you can inspire by getting in front of people. But I think the horizon of the economy, well, we've got a unique economy here that's got its own ruling going on, let alone what's going in the transformation around the careers in the country. I think this is like candy land for things that you can be starting off with your own real estate company. But I think it's exciting, and I think we've got tools. Maybe we just have to think of how the tools work that we've got.
So if I could just comment, I have 4 sons, and one of my sons has maybe had difficulty in trying, he did spend some time trying to find the right path. Maybe a little frustrating how long it took, but it was just his way. And I think a lot of what's going on today in our world is called the Great Reset, where people are taking and I know I really followed my son's lead. The more I think about it, where when I left, I was also in a banking situation. I had gotten to the highest level. They didn't offer me anything else, and I just kind of said to myself, yeah, the paycheck's nice, but where do I go with this? Where is my own growth, and where can I go? So anyway, that's a whole. So I think it's really, we're in the time of the Great Reset. So I think the entrepreneurial shift, I think, is something that is coming out of that, and people having that, that go ahead and say, I'm going to go and do something that I want to do finally in my life. But anyway, I just want to read a quote that my mother-in-law is actually a fantastic human being. She's 84 years old, but you never know it looking at her. And she still sells real estate, only by referral, but she has a lot of referrals for doing it so many years. And she, when she was talking to me and inspiring me, and she had wanted me to do this in New York 15 years ago, but I was called back to my job at Fidelity, where I had worked there prior, and I went that route. The quote is, "You can never cross the ocean unless you have courage to lose sight of the shore." And she actually sent me that quote recently and said, never forget this, when you're going forward. And truthfully, I'm a little bit of an impatient person. So, I feel, getting this set up is taking so long, but every day I have to tell myself, relax, you're only 2 months, it's going to take some time to build relationships. And
Perfect. And is she selling real estate here or?
No, she's in New York still. We're from Long Island,
Yeah.
so she's still up there.
Right.
Not as much now because my stepfather-in-law's ill, but she still gets phone calls, and she's not keeping up with the social media. That's the other thing. She said that, it's important in today's world to kind of get your message out there, as well in your local relationships. So.
Well, good luck. Your mother's statement, so beautiful. Summed up in one word though. There.
Exactly.
And, Ed, I want to respond to when you said about nombre de Dios. And
Yes.
so I that cross was erected when my family first moved to North Florida. So we're from New York, then DC, and then here. And so I remember when it was there, and when it went up, and it was, it's a big deal.
Right.
And a couple of years ago, I just kind of like fell in love with that place. And I was looking for my avocation, maybe not avocation, but in the healing ministry. And it's important to have spiritual support. And so I was looking for a pastor who would have my back, who would cover me in prayer. I was having a hard time. And I was down at that cross when a friend of mine called me and said, "You don't have one priest who's willing to be your covering. You've got 1,000. And she had had a dream, and in the dream, there was a picture of a map that's hanging in that. It used to be a bronze plaque that was out by the cross, and it was of the Franciscan missions in North Florida. And when she told me, this one was an Episcopal priest, she lives in Detroit, and she said, "Oh, I had this dream, and there was this map, and it started like south of Jacksonville, and it went all the way up to South Carolina, which is where the missions, they started in St. Augustine and they spread." Oh, so she had a dream, and I'm like, oh, maybe there's something here. So I kept going back to the, down there just to walk around. And, Father Rich is a real big promoter of, if you belong to this parish, you probably should be making a trip down there, every now and then. And I was down there one time, and actually I was with my grandson. And there was an archaeological dig. And they had found what they think is an altar. It wasn't the original altar, but it was probably in a building that was there maybe in the 1700s, early 1700s, something like that. And it just hit me that there's a lot that we don't know that's gone on.
Absolutely.
There's a lot that we know that's not gone on. But the thing that we do know is that Christianity landed here and it spread. So in terms of your reset, I think living in this part of the world is just such a wonderful opportunity because the trail has been blazed. And not all of it was good. Some of it wasn't so pretty, but it did spread. And there are and that's kind of like to affirm you being here from my perspective is, aren't we all? We're at the start of something new or over or whatever. And we are blessed to live in this time where the old ways just aren't going to work anymore. And they really need to be invented. So I've been sitting and talking to Anne about, whether she should go the entrepreneurial thing. And this girl was a risk taker. And she's an adventurer. And
That's what you have to be.
yeah. And so you spent time here and you got the blessing of it, of being here wherever you end up. But that's for us to talk about later. But we all are, we all are. And so God's pushing the kingdom forward. He doesn't push it back. And you're doing it. And so the thing that struck me about besides the place, being drawn to the place, the thing that struck me was about what made you happy, what made you fulfilled, and that you spent the time to examine that. So how did you do that?
So, the word synchronicity
Yeah.
came out of Carl Jung originally, and there's a lot of debate between he and others. And this is kind of a strange book called The Celestine Prophecy. You ever read that one?
Yeah.
Well, and that was kind of the bringing to life of this notion of synchronicity. And that was something else that started after Tess. And the whole thing with Matthew Kelly was just like, when coincidences are beyond coincidences, like there's a word for it, it's synchronicity. It's like, and it's going all the time. And I think what happened is she opened my ears and my mind to this other realm that I was shut off from before, and I hadn't since her. And literally the day that I left there, I'd come down because there was this big storm, like a nor'easter was sitting, it was flooding everything, and I came down, we had moved here permanently, and I don't know why I even went there. It wasn't even open, like I had to climb over the gate to get on the property, and I was just by myself. And I come back to my favorite little wings place near our house where I know the owner, and I'm sitting there, and I hear someone, right when I just come from there, someone said, synchronicity is God talking to you. And I got up and I said, who just said that? And this guy says, why are you reacting like that? And I said, well, because I know what you mean. And he goes, and he starts pulling on me, asking me what you're, like, when did you, like, discover this or whatever? And I told him. And he goes, yeah, I lost my daughter at 5. And I went home and I'm going, okay, something crazy just happened today. And you know what he said? He goes, there's a movie that was made for the Celestine Prophecy. I didn't know that. He goes, most of it was filmed downtown St. Augustine.
No way.
Yes. And I went home and Googled it, and sure enough, right on Avil Street. Because they thought it looked like Peru. So when stuff like that starts happening to you, it's like, what do you need? A freaking anvil to hit you on the head?
Yeah, yeah.
I think we can all trace at some point in our lives there's an inflection point with all of us. And I shared some of my story a few meetings back, but for me, there were several, but the one that was most pivotal was when my older daughter was diagnosed with Crohn's disease and she had emergency surgery. I'd been away from the church for almost 25 years. I grew up in Catholic high school here. And somewhere along the way, I just kind of drifted. And I wasn't going to church. I hadn't gone to confession. I didn't pray. And at some point, I was even becoming more of an agnostic than anything else. And I think Father Pagano said it this past weekend, when do we look for God? It's when we're in trouble, right? And my daughter going for emergency surgery. It was late at night, day after Super Bowl Sunday. I remember she's getting ready to get married. And she was having a real tough time. And I remember going to the chapel, which was at the Cleveland Clinic down in South Florida. And I remember going to the chapel. I was in there by myself. It was probably about 9:30 at night on Monday. And I'm sitting there and I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to communicate with God. I'd been so long. I just started talking, right? I didn't, I didn't sound the cross, but I start talking. And I can remember tearing up and I said to him, if you pull her through this, I'll be back. And sure enough, I remember I came out of the chapel sitting there in the lobby and the surgeon comes out and she says, we got her and she's going to be fine. And I remember giving me such a warm hug. I almost crushed her, but from that moment on, I came back to church and I've been ever since. So we go through that, and then, as we go through that process, now I'm back at church. Now, what am I doing? I was banker for 40 years.
Oh, yeah, right.
Yeah. And you're right, for some of us, once you're a banker, there's nothing else you can do. You don't have any transferable skills. Just of course, but, for the most part, you're a banker for life. Some form or fashion.
Yeah.
But at some point, I retired early. I was 59 when I retired. And fortunately, I was blessed like you to be able to do it. And at that point, I was looking for my own calling. What am I going to do now for the rest of my life? 59, you're still too young to not do anything.
Yeah.
So it drew me into coaching, and I became a leadership coach.
Oh, there you go.
So that's what I did for the ensuing 9 years.
All right.
And sure enough, we find our way. We've got to kind of listen for the whispers, And
That's great.
so that's where we come to. And so you can't be afraid, like you said, you can't be afraid to look at other options. Sooner or later, you're going to come to a point in life, you say, is this all there is?
Yeah.
What do I do from here?
And you can't be afraid to fall down. So I did several times. My wife's a little blunt. She heard me say one time, yeah, I pivoted onto my next thing. She goes, is pivot the new word for failure?
And China's on board.
there.
I went to Cincinnati for Right at Home. That's where they're based.
All right on.
Look at their opportunity, and so I looked at a lot of different things, you know. And it took me a while to finally, and it was purely by accident that I stumbled into coaching. So
There you go.
it happens. You never know.
You know, the inflection point, that's a really interesting you know, when do you know you're even at that place, you know? But today, it was funny, on the way, I work in a tax office during the tax season. On the way to work today, I was in the turn lane behind a state vehicle. Now, my last corporate job was with Department of Children and Families as the planner for the Northeast region, and we had state cars. But I would never use a state car because they were horrible. And I was sitting there, I was remembering that there was one that they bought in an auction that actually had a hole in the floorboard because he bought it at an auction. It had been involved in a crime and somebody had shot a gun and you could see the ground. That's the kind of stuff they gave us to drive to Daytona or Tallahassee, you know, or whatever. And I was sitting there thinking about that and thinking about some of the management decisions. You know, the budget is so tight. So the person who was in charge of that area, you know, what she did is she just hoarded the money. And in March of every year, because the fiscal year ends in June, so in March of every year, she had this big pot of money and she'd spend it like it was Christmas. And we got things like new chairs, you know, and here we are in cars that have bullet holes in the floor. And that was just not for me. It was not for me at all.
It's your inflection.
It was that this is ludicrous. That was it. And, you know, and I mean, I stayed long enough to get a pension and then out you go. But that, you know, that inflection point, the thing is sometimes the decision's made for you and you're forced to do that. But the freedom that comes from inside, I am a child of God. I am a daughter of the Most High. He's going to take care of me. And I'm going to have to show up and do my thing. And it will work out.
Perfect. You know, just something else in this book about a hole in the gospel, just even just the Lord's Prayer, where, you know, just that thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, that as Christians and as Catholics, you know, we think, you know, you want to do all the right thing. It says not just to get to heaven, it's the whole idea is what are you doing on earth? Right? In every which possible way on earth. And that was like the hole in the gospel is it doesn't talk enough about that. Like, what are you doing to your last breath to impact all that's around you? The simplest thing, you know, talk about leadership or whatever, right? You're at a bank, and you've got tellers and branches, and this Richard Davis would say, do you know how you can change lives by just walking up to a teller line as a senior executive and just talking to them and thanking them for what they do and how important they are? They float and go home and tell their spouses about it or whatever. Do you know that? Right? Like the simplest things you can do. And yet every day we don't do them unless you're thinking about it and just how simple that is to do.
Yeah. You know, for me, a lot of times what motivates me is it's an expression of gratitude because I know that I have been blessed. I know there are people who have helped me. I know there are people who have been kind to me. And the other day I was thinking about how one of the most fun things you can ever do is to help someone who is important to someone who helped you.
Yeah, I heard a phrase, you know, you can look at it one of two ways. I kind of prefer to look at it a more favorable way. And that is, you know, and it's really as Christians, but as Catholics, as Christians, you know, the saying was, sometimes Christians spend so much time preparing for the next life, they forget to live this one.
That's right. Like, you know, yes, you lived a clean life and so forth, and rather come in sliding sideways, they say, or whatever, but impacting as many lives along the way.
Ed, you recently gave me a great piece of advice, and I had to do in the context of the banking school. Remember our conversation? So, want to share it?
Well, you tell it.
No, you give me advice.
So Ted is a wonderful leader within the banking school, and it's a 3-year program. And he runs with third-year faculty. And so there's one for second and first. But the school itself has someone who runs the banking school, and then even a larger education program where they do training at banks with staff. So we're both in agreement, and so are others, that the person who's running the banking school is not the right person. He wasn't a banker. He's got his PhD. You could tell his eyes on other things, and he's doing this because it's a safe job.
Worst step.
Yeah, he's making good money. He's got good, he's got young kids, so it's like a safe place for him. But he's not really inspiring anybody. And so, I said one day that he'll leave, finally. And Ted, why don't you go for it, but how do you do that? Well, obviously this guy has a boss who runs the whole education thing. So I think my advice was go to him and say, I'd be interested if you're not saying, hey, this guy needs to go. There's a way to put it. But I said, if the banker would always kill me where we would go through all this work to, replace somebody in a position, and you'd announce it, and somebody would come up and say, why didn't you tell me? And I said, why didn't you tell me? Why I didn't know you were interested. Why?
Mhm.
Right? So instead of waiting, make it known. And so you did.
I did, and it was the right advice because I've shared with some of you that I'm going through this pivot. I think I have one last good gig in me left, and my passion is teaching. Ed knows that, just like your passion is teaching. And but I'm comfortable, safe where I am, but I'm not fulfilled. I've said how many times in this group, I said, risk management doesn't make my soul sing. So what is it? And I'm searching for that thing. And so, but it's physician cured ourselves. So you obviously, and John also has also been, as you put it, in the saddle, ask those questions, put yourself out there. If you don't put yourself out there, you'll never know. So I took the advice and there was a way, because I think our conversation was, hey, yeah, I don't think he's the right guy either, but I don't want to be the reason for tipping him over either.
No.
So it was a fine line. It
Yeah.
And it was just said, and it was also, and Mike, you and I talked about this earlier today. I said, I've been praying the prayer of humility also, because it could be very much an ego thing and saying, oh, I should be able to do this. But is my thoughts in line with what God wants me to do? And am I being willing to do do what he wants me to do? So it's been more of a prayer of, I only want to do what you want to do. And I know you will give me the grace to go through whatever it is. And if you don't want me to go, I ain't going anyway, because that's not going to happen. You'll close all the doors, but you'll give me the grace to see through. But I also agree with you in that same context. If I don't try, and God gives us the desire to work, do something and serve him, how will I know? So to dare is another way of saying.
There is to do.
There's to do.
I always say, who's gonna say no?
Right.
For you asking, no one. Mike, you've been quiet. I've been watching you.
Well, first of all, you and I actually spoke at the phone.
Yes, you're the TV station.
Yeah.
Yes.
Nice to meet you.
Hey.
You're equally as great a person as you are on the phone. Great energy. I recognize that. But just kind of curious, you and I talked about it briefly, but if you could extrapolate a little bit more about the Matthew Kelly situation, because that's just a God moment. You said, and you spoke about that, and then you also spoke about synchronicity, the miracles. You just have to look for them.
Mm-hmm.
They're there. They come before us all the time. Are we aware of it? So
Right.
I'm just kind of getting you to, talk a little bit about that. If that makes sense. I hope.
No, it's and I think it was asked, when did that all start happening? And I really believe it was, the unfortunate circumstance with my daughter, but if you just believe a soul exists and so living for two, that notion of wanting to earn her respect, right? And so it's when so many of those things started happening, and I'm finding it happening all the time. And to me, it's through connecting people. Like when you help someone find somebody else, and that just explodes with excitement, and for them, I feel that's a part of it all, right? Is seeing that and how you can help other people just by introducing people, being a connector. And that's kind of what has powered me to so many of these different experiences. Is that point, but it's still paying attention to the synchronicity. And there are some other people on the faculty at the bank school in Seattle that picked up on this, and they talk. They'll call us all the time and say, "You're not going to believe what just happened." And so we celebrated it, and it's and then we look at other people and they're just like, "What are you just talking about?" Right? Like they can't get there for whatever reason, or don't want to. Yeah.
No, I'll tie in banking school for 1 second. One of the things we'll tell our students is, and you learn this very quickly in risk management, you'll never have perfect information. You'll always have partial information, and you'll never know how it'll turn out. But what we teach our students is the confidence to ask the questions, to not be afraid to raise their hand. And I think the same thing applies in the career ministry or next door in the financial planning ministry, in asking those questions and not being afraid to do it. And to John's point, who's going to say no? Or said another way, so what if you fail? Pick yourself up, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So it's the confidence, and I think the confidence, and we'll say here in this meeting that the pastor, is prayer's foundation. Where do we get that confidence? Where do we get that hope? We get it from prayer and listening to God's word, and that opens it up, and then recognizing the signs along the way and saying he's with us. Affirmative.
So did you indeed land the role as head of the banking school?
TBD.
It's
got in God's time. Well, no, doing his job this year, but who knows? But now that the seed has been planted.
I will tell you what this process, and this is, I've been fortunate and blessed to be a part of this group and to listen to great coaches like Bob and Joan and Joe and John, and listen to their advice. And I finally said to John, I got to turn the lens of myself and look at it. And what I've been discerning, and Ed, you hit on it earlier, and I think I even said when I gave my remarks, what I really learned, what I really want to do is I want to help people. And I can't help it in control effectiveness. It's just not, it's just not there. But as I've been interviewing on some other jobs, my passion is coming out again because it is more akin to what I think I'm good at what I'm really doing. And it's dealing with people or teaching. And I kind of narrowed down my pathways. It's one of those two paths.
Wow. And see, if you hadn't been in the situation that you were in, you wouldn't have had to address that.
No, this is my comfort zone.
Yeah.
And I thought I had reinvented myself several times in my career, and I realized it doesn't stop.
No.
But that's the joy.
Yeah.
When you find something
Yeah.
and you stumble onto something or encounter something that gives you meaning, then it's not, I bet you don't feel like you're working right now. There's the joy and there's just the enthusiasm.
No,
You
that's
can't
right.
wait for the next step.
Yeah. No, it hasn't. Trying to find that perfect balance. There isn't a perfect balance, right? But if you're fulfilled in what you're doing, then you found it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's still what I learned down here is you still need to be able to say yes more than no when someone says, "You want to go out fishing tomorrow?"
Yeah.
You have to be able to say yes. This buddy of mine, because he said, "Ed, you said no 2 times in a row. That's a bad trend." But he only calls me like the night before because he waits until the conditions are so he goes 7 miles out. So he said, "Be careful, you're starting to go too far the wrong way."
So Ed, just maybe, this might not be the final point, but it seems like you've had skills and competencies, you've had knowledge, skills, competencies, and abilities that could be used in many different settings.
Yes.
And
It's
you're-
transferable.
So you learn how to apply to the different settings. Yeah. Like the people, when you were talking about the guy who said, you're going to be able to do this. We're going to, we had a guy here a couple of weeks ago that talked about careers in intelligence, and he was a CIA agent. And I mean, it was a fascinating talk about, I mean, it made me want to go back to work, and it's like, oh yeah, then hire me at age 69 to, to be a spook,
Language.
I know. I, yeah, but you're the salsa dancer, But that's the thing, is like, that's a place where they take everything that you have. And they say, you're not going to stay in the same job for more than a couple of years.
Took him on the CIA now.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
yeah. Yeah. Well, there's
Your name in.
the number, there are a number of countries that I want to travel to.
Well, I think we're wrapped.
Yep, we are. So we'll normally do close with a prayer. So Ed, I'm gonna indulge on you to lead us through an hour Father to close out the meeting.
All right. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven,
Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done. On earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
Thank you, Ed.